They were built only for industry. Horses pulled the boats. The Industrial Revolution was happening. Engines had not been invented. No trains, no cars, and no proper roads. This is the Grand Union Canal. It comes down from the north. If we turned the boat round and took you the other way, we can take you all the way to York, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, over to Wales, Oxford, Bristol, Bath, down to Guildford, back to here. Notice how fast we are travelling. How long do you think that would take? I'll give you an idea. The Grand Union Canal, behind us, goes all the way to Birmingham. And if we take you to Birmingham but we go by road on the motorway, right now, we'll be in Birmingham early this evening. If we take you there by canal, you will need sleeping bags. It takes 2 weeks to make a journey that's only 2 hours by road. The canals are very slow. I'm going to tell you all about why and how. Look to the right, please. Can you see a bit of canal there? Yeah. It's the last bit of the Grand Union. It stops a short distance near Paddington Station. The Grand Union opened right here in 1801. It was the main industrial highway coming from the north. The bridge in front of us is the beginning of the Regent's Canal. It goes across North London, past Camden, down to Limehouse Docks on the River Thames, and from there you get on another canal into Hertfordshire. Look on the left, please. On the left is a pathway. This is for horses. Canal boats were pulled by horsepower until engines were invented. The pathway for the horses to walk along is called the tow path, the towing pathway. It's on our left side. The house on the left is where payment was made for using the canal, and it's an old toll house. There are hundreds of these toll houses along our canals. Most of them are private homes now, because our canals have changed. They were built only for industry. These were rough, dirty, industrial highways. Horses pulling the boats. But of course engines came, road and rail transport took over. We still use the canals a little bit for industry, but mostly we live on the canals. Please look around you at our boats. Most of these are permanent homes for the people who live on board. Look at the shape of them. Standard canal boats in this country are built in this long, narrow shape. Narrow is the important word. They have to fit through much smaller canals, very narrow canals, narrow locks, narrow tunnels, and they're built narrow to fit the canals. That's why they are called narrow boats. Please don't call our boats barges. The narrow boats you're looking at are modern. They have been built as homes for people to live in, but a proper working narrowboat in the old days, they carried cargo, the same long narrow shape, but they were cargo carrying boats. Almost the entire boat would be a storage area or cargo hold, and a working boat has a small cabin at the back, and the boatman's cabin is no bigger than a large cupboard. That's where the whole family had to live, with no modern comforts. Now look at the modern boats each side. Today we can use all of the boat to live in. We've got plenty of room. In our kitchens we use bottled gas for cooking. We have coal and wood stoves to keep warm. We have water tanks with fresh water for showers and toilets are not emptied into the canals. We have pump out services for that. And we've got engines now. Instead of a horse, we can make our own electricity. We can have all of the modern electric items that you've got at home. But we can undo our ropes, and we can travel, and we can take our homes with us. More than 23,000 of us live on the canals, but they are modern narrowboats. None of those boats were here in the old days. The boat you're sitting inside, this is a proper working narrowboat. You're sitting inside a boat called Jason. This boat, Jason, built in 1906, was pulled by a horse. You guys are sitting in the cargo hold. In fact, you are the cargo, and we can carry 20 tons of storage in this area where we put chairs. Behind me is the cabin where the family used to live. You cannot see it now because you're inside the boat, but you all looked at the boat before you got inside. Do you remember? Yeah. The cabin, only half of that cabin was for a whole family. Jason is a very special boat. Most of them are made of steel these days. Jason is so old, made of iron and wood. There are very few of these left. At 119 years old, Jason is now one of the oldest working narrowboats, still working. We are very proud to look after such a beautiful historic boat, and you should have noticed that we do not have a horse pulling Jason anymore, as we now have an engine. Look ahead. Can you see there's a tunnel? There's a hill, and the canal goes straight through the hill. The tunnel is 250 metres long, that's 272 yards, but there is no tow path in the tunnel for horses to walk and pull the boats. I'll explain to you how they got through tunnels in the old days, but please listen carefully. The tow path is on the left, and it stops before the tunnel entrance. The horse had to be untied from the boat. Somebody would take the horse over the top of the hill. They would wait at the far end of the tunnel for the boat to come through. To get boats through, before engine power, they pushed the boats through with their feet. Look at the front of our boat. On the front there's a coil of rope. Imagine this. Two people on the front. One on the left, lying on their back with their legs outwards, and one on the right, lying on their back with their legs outwards. Through the tunnel, they would be pushing along the side walls, literally walking it through along the side walls of the tunnel. It was known as legging or walking a boat. How many of you understood what I've just said? I'm impressed. It's not easy to explain. And all tunnels are different. They're different heights, they're different widths, they're different lengths. When we get into the tunnel, you will notice it is too wide for you to reach the side walls if you were lying on the front of the boat. So for this tunnel, they placed a plank of wood across the front of the boat, with the plank of wood sticking out each side. The two people legging the boat had to lie on that, one on the left side, one on the right side. And that made it a lot more dangerous for them. So looking at the front now, the legging plank would be across the front, the two people in position, one on the left, one on the right, lying on their backs, and the boat moving very slowly, and at the entrance they could keep it moving by walking it or legging it along the side walls. That was hard work, but this is only a short tunnel. There are tunnels that are 2 miles long. The longest one is 3 miles long, nearly 6 kilometres. But it was a very simple and very effective method. So careful of arms, elbows inside the boat as we go through, and be careful with your hands. pull a boat like Jason. Remember, we can carry 20 tons in here. The boat weighs nearly another 20 tons on top of that. Only one horse was needed. Now I can pull this boat on my own, and so could you, even fully loaded. The water is taking the weight. The water does a lot of the work for you. That's why water transport is so efficient, if you think, container ships or cruise liners. But engines were invented. Road and railway transport was much faster than this, and they stopped using our canals. They started to fill them in, and we nearly lost them. But we can still see where horses' ropes rubbed against the edges of the bridges. Now there are rope marks on the bridge ahead of us. I'll show you the rope marks, but look at the bridge now. Follow the arch to the left side, and there's a bit of green paint. When we get there, look at the edge of the bridge from the green paint down to the ground. There's a bit of metal embedded in the brickwork, smooth horizontal grooves worn into it where horses' ropes constantly rubbed around the edge. You got them? There will be rope marks at the other end as well. The railings on the left were not there, they would be in the way. Our horse was 20 yards ahead. Look ahead. The horse would have gone out of the bridge now to the left, and that long rope is dragging around the left edge. Hundreds of boats pulled by horses. We can still see rope markings on the older bridges. Look at the left edge of the bridge as we come out. Start from the ground. There's a tuft of grass. Follow the edge of the bridge up for about 3 feet. You can see there's a bit of metal that has rope marks on it. And we will see more of them. Engines were being put into boats as early as 1911, but they carried on using horses, and on this canal up to 1956. Now the boat that's waiting for us to come through the bridge hole is our rival company. The boat on our left, Perseus, is also an old workboat turned into a passenger boat. Now look at Perseus. There were no windows, there was no roof. That's the cargo hold. Look at the cabin at the back. Look at the cabin at the back. Only half of that cabin, only half of it was for a whole family. Now they've got 3 old boats turned into passenger boats. None of them are anywhere near as old as Jason. So factories, industries were built along the canals. Look up on the left, there's a power station built here so coal could be brought by canal. It's a storage power station now because we do not burn coal in big furnaces in London because of pollution. Look at the narrowboats. You know now they're called narrowboats. You can see they're modern. Again, these are people's homes. We can travel whenever we want to. You cannot turn most narrowboats around in the normal width of the canal because they're too long. This boat, Jason, is 72 feet, 21 metres. Can we turn Jason round right now? I'd love to see you try. It would be impossible. So this open space on our left is kept clear for boats to turn around, and they used the wind to help them. When we turn a narrowboat, we say we're winding the boat, and we can only just wind or turn Jason in that space. When you live and work on the canals, very important to know where they are. You cannot turn round until you find one, and they might be a considerable distance apart. Winding holes, keep looking left. Now look at the wall behind the boats. Keep looking, you'll see arch-shaped markings where there were tunnels. They're bricked up now, they're no longer used. Those access tunnels are where they unloaded coal from their boats into the power station, and then they had empty boats, and they could take away the waste from burnt coal, which is ash and clinker, the lumpy bits of burnt coal, used for brick making and for road surfacing. Almost everything was recycled in those days. Down the far end, in the last 2 tunnels, they kept horses, 200 of them. Most people working on the canals did not own a horse. They hired them as they moved along. Part of Camden Market is where they used to keep horses, and it's now called the Stables Market. The families, remember, they had a cabin at the back of the boat, no bigger than a large cupboard. They had no modern comforts, and they had babies and children with them. And the children would be working by 5 years old. Proper work, always on the move, and no chance to go to school. Even into the 1960s, many canal families could still not read or write. I have friends with old working narrowboats. They are still out there, they are still carrying cargo, and they are still living in a little cabin at the back. Let's talk about what they carried on the canals. Everything. These were the main highways. Everything that today we would put on road or rail transport would be going by canal. There was coal and waste products. In fact, waste products are still carried on the canals. Back then, think of the waste product that 200 horses are going to make. Very useful stuff taken by canal out to the countryside, sold as fertiliser. I think you know what I'm talking about. Back then, everything. Raw materials going to different factories. Iron ore, limestone, clay, building materials. Clay would be going to the potteries industry, and the pottery was carried as well. There were things coming from all over the world, brought by ships into our ports, put onto canal boats, taken to factories for processing. Tea, coffee, spices, paper, cotton, silk, rubber, fruit juice from the Mediterranean, cocoa powder, sugar cane from the West Indies going to the chocolate factories, barrels of beer and wine, and, interestingly, blocks of ice. Before we invented fridges, we imported ice, mostly from Norway and quite a bit from Canada. And it was transported on the canals, and there were buildings called ice houses where it was stored. During different wars, the canals carried military items like gunpowder, ammunition, machinery. After the Second World War, canals were not used so much. Road and rail transport had taken over. In the early 1960s, the government closed the canals down, but they left the canal people with no livelihood. They started filling in canals, destroying the locks, wrecking old boats like Jason. But canal people wanted the canals to continue, so they slowly changed how we use them. This old boat, Jason, was the first one to be turned into a passenger boat in London. Other people started building new narrow boats and, of course, opening canals that had been filled in. Although we managed to open 2,000 miles, this is a man-made waterway, and if it is not looked after, we could easily lose them again. We are on the north side of Regent's Park now. Regent's Park's on the right, by the way. Regent's Park's on the right side, and it was built in the early 1800s. Regent's Park was designed by a famous architect, John Nash, who also designed Regent Street, Clarence House, parts of Buckingham Palace. Keep looking up on the right. See the house on the right? This is the first one of 7. They were not built in the 1800s, and they were not designed by John Nash. These are fairly new. They've been built more than 100 years after the rest of Regent's Park. The architect, Quenlin Terry, designed them to look a bit like the older John Nash houses, but they're fairly new. And after this one on the right, the next 4 of them are going to be hidden behind the trees. One of the largest in central London, on the left. You can't see these private gardens if you walk around the streets. They're hidden behind brick walls. Up there on the left is a road, a big brick wall. You would have no idea about the garden. But what you will also not know is about the canal being down here. An interesting part of our history. A lot of people don't realise. You were never supposed to see any of this. You were never intended to sit inside an old working narrowboat. The canals were considered really dirty and horrible. Going through towns, they hid them behind the buildings. Can you see on the left today they've got railings? There would have been a huge brick wall. So those rich people did not have to look at us horrible, dirty boat people. It's such an important part of our history. And if we don't talk about it, it will be forgotten. So I'll come back to that later. We don't see the house that goes with the garden. That is a block of flats. Up on the right side is the last one of the new houses. It's called the Regency Villa, just over 20 years old now. We are still on the Regent's Canal, on the north side of Regent's Park. This canal, the same as every canal in the world, is man-made. In this country, mostly Irish migrants built them. 200 years ago, they did not have machinery like we do today. They built 4,000 miles of canals by hand. They were known as navigation engineers. The word navvy that we still use for people who build and maintain highways comes from the canal builders. Today, an organisation called Canal and River Trust are supposed to look after our canals. Personally, I don't think they do a fantastic job. This needs to be looked after. This is less than 6 feet deep. That's what, 2 metres? And people like to throw rubbish into waterways. Supermarket trolleys, car tyres, stolen motorbikes, bicycles, fridges, cookers, mattresses, all down there causing damage to boats and wildlife. If it is not removed, we will lose our canals as they fill up with rubbish and we can't move. The water has to be put in. It is not a natural waterway. The water here is pumped in from a reservoir in North London, and it's flowing in the direction we're going. It's constantly flowing. If the water is not topped up as it goes down, obviously we will lose water, we can't move our boat, no more canal. And if Canal and River Trust don't look after the canals, that is what will happen. Okay guys, look ahead. Can you see the bridge? This is Macclesfield Bridge, although we call it something else. Back in 1874, there was a boat. They had 4 tons of gunpowder on board. They were passing underneath the bridge. The gunpowder ignited and exploded, and the whole bridge was blown up. Obviously they've rebuilt it. The evidence of the explosion can be seen in the rope marks. So I want you to look at the first column on the left and the last one on the left. Down the bottom of each of those columns you can see little notches. They are rope marks, but they're not where they should be, because those 2 columns have got rope markings on both sides of them, and that should be impossible. Those 2 columns were turned around before they rebuilt the top of the bridge. Now the boat coming past, this is Jenny Wren. She's similar to Jason. The people are sitting in the cargo hold. Check the cabin at the back. Only half of that cabin was for a whole family to live in. Nowhere near as old as Jason Wren. So the bridge was destroyed. The main problem was not the boatmen being killed, but the fact that the canal was completely blocked with tons of bricks and rubble. This was the main industrial highway. Boats could not get through to the docks or to the factories, and if you think about where you live, if a main road or rail or waterway was to be destroyed, it causes a massive problem. And it did here. With no modern machinery, they picked out every single brick by hand. It took only a few days because that is how important the canal was, and ever since then the bridge has been known as Blow Up Bridge. And have a look around you now. Have a good look around you. Think about where you are. You can walk to Oxford Street in less than 20 minutes. There's a main road. It's just a few metres away, a few yards away. Out there in the woods, foxes, squirrels. Down in the water, lots of fish. We've seen waterbirds, coots, moorhens, mallards. Now the towpath on the left side, the towpath on the left, you know what it was built for. And I bet you those people have got no idea. It was not built for people, it was not built for the general public. It was illegal for the general public to be anywhere near the canals or the towpath. This was an industrial highway. But times change. Nobody back then thought that one day the canals would be used for pleasure. So some of our towpaths have been opened up so people can go for a walk or take dogs walking or go jogging. And we're coming up to London Zoo. We don't see much from down here. It is one of the oldest zoos in the world. London Zoo first opened in 1828. It is important for education and conservation now. A lot of animals will be on international breeding programs to help protect endangered species. There are 3 warthogs who live up there on the right. We're not going to see them, I'm afraid. Warthogs are an African bush pig. There's a family of African hunting dogs in the next enclosure. Again, we are very unlikely to see them. They are beautiful animals, but out in Africa they are now so rare they have to breed them in zoos to stop them becoming extinct. African hunting dogs, or painted dogs, they're beautifully coloured. They're not out. Excuse me. Let's see if we can see on the left any black and white colobus monkeys in the old Snowdon aviary. It was built for birds, but it became derelict. It was designed by the Queen's father-in-law. They now have it as a primate enclosure. Can you see those black and white primates? They're colobus monkeys. They're an African species. This whole part of the zoo has got an African theme, and they come from the rainforest areas. Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. Now that's all we are going to see of any animals from down here. Is there anyone going to London Zoo today after this boat trip? You are? Okay, well, from Camden, you might need to hurry up. I don't know what time they close. Walk from Camden back to the zoo. It won't take you more than, what, 15-20 minutes. Are you enjoying travelling at top speed? Are you enjoying travelling at top speed? It's a hectic life. We're not allowed to go faster than this, and it's about 4 miles an hour. You can walk faster than a canal boat. You can definitely jog faster than a canal boat. So you may be wondering why we have canals if you can walk faster. I don't think you can carry 20 tons though, can you? Do you know where our driver is? At the back, well done. You've noticed. You steer a narrowboat from the back, where the engine room and controls are. Today we've got Joe with us at the back, and he's looking across the roof above your heads to see where he's going, and he has to slow down. He's slowed down right now. Joe can see ahead. He can see there are narrowboats ahead on the right. They're moored, that means they're parked or tied up. People live there. If we were still on top speed now, those boats would be moving. We could rock them about, we could break things, we could even break their ropes, and if we did that we would be very, very unpopular. And that's not a good thing to be on the canals, because everybody knows everybody. If you want to travel on our canals, you can hire narrowboats for holidays. This is the speed you will travel at, by the way, for most of the time. There are more and more people living on narrowboats when they're moored or parked up like this. We have to slow right down to this speed, and we have to stay at this speed until we've gone past them. Not only are there more narrowboats, there are locks, or écluses if you're French. Locks are an invention to move water up and down different levels. There are hundreds and hundreds of locks along our canals. We have to do them ourselves. They take time, but they're part of the whole thing. These people pay rent to keep their boats in these spaces. They can travel with their boats when they want to. No one can take their space while they're gone. And when you travel and you want to stop somewhere, you must find visitor moorings. Now, moorings is a word for a parking space for boats. You can stay on visitor moorings for a short time, then you have to keep moving. A lot of people continually cruise. The reason we're sounding the horn, this is a blind bend. The Regent's Canal turns left, and there might be a boat round the corner, and we sound the horn so they know that we're here. A lot of accidents happen on corners like this. We cannot take you straight on because the canal that should be there has gone. Straight ahead of us, the canal went on to King's Cross, to a big fruit and vegetable market. There was a depot where they kept hay for the thousands of horses that worked in London. But then, of course, it was filled in after the war, built over with houses and streets, and then it's gone forever. Look to the right. Look to the right. There you go, no more canal, just a dead end. There's the Feng Shang Princess, it's a floating Chinese restaurant. And those two geese in the middle there, and that thing sticking up, they are Egyptian geese. And we've just turned into the Primrose Hill area. Oh, people going to the zoo. Quickly, your attention. Yep. Primrose Hill. On the left is a church, St. Mark's of Primrose Hill, and behind the church is Primrose Hill. From the top of Primrose Hill, a fantastic view of London. How to get there? 10 minutes walk from Camden. Okay, back to rope markings now. Look at the left edges of this bridge. Rope marks are only on the older bridges, only on the towpath side. Please look at the left edges of the bridge. Left. Can you see there's a strip of metal on each corner with rope marks? Ropes would wear through those strips of metal. All they had to do then is to replace a strip of metal rather than making major and more expensive repairs on the brickwork. Very sensible. Look ahead. Look ahead. Can you see that on the left, on the towpath, we have lots of boats moored on the left. All of them are using visitor spaces. They can stay here for a short time, but then they have to move on. The boats on our right are owned by the people in the houses behind them. Two different sides to the canals. The towpath is only on one side. There is no need for it to be on both. The opposite side to the towpath is called the off side, and that's usually private property with no pathway for horses. Now please have a look around you. Think back to what I told you earlier. This is where it's really apparent. Look on the left. Look on the left. There's a huge brick wall put there so they didn't have to look at us horrid, dirty boat people. On the right we have beautiful gardens, but they would have had big brick walls because they didn't want to look at us either. But times have changed and people have opened up their gardens. I love the fact that we see the backsides of our towns and cities. I think it's much more interesting to see the backsides. You learn a lot more about how people live. And the interesting part is it's all because this was considered so horrible. An interesting thing here that makes me amused, on our right side are 4 flower pots, and the people in that house, they grow those flowers every single year. Took me ages to realise that they can't see them. We've got a proper working boat just here on our left side. See, the canals are not used just for pleasure. This is still a working waterway, and we've got workboats like this that are carrying building materials and things around. Camden is now famous for the markets. Camden was an industrial area. It developed around the canal. Think about this, guys. If you worked in Camden in a factory back then, or if you worked here on the canal on a narrowboat like Jason, not in a million years would you think that one day in the future people would be using this for pleasure. They really were considered fairly awful, nasty places. Times change. Fortunately, sometimes for the better. We're going under some bridges carrying railway lines. They were not here when the canal was built. There were no railways. The railway up there, the railway lines go to and from Euston Station. We are still in central London. The building in front of us is the Pirate Castle. It's a youth club. It was specially built, early 70s. The children at the time helped raise the money. Two boats on our right used for taking local people for day trips, for longer holidays. One of the boats has got wheelchair access. They do a lot of work with special needs people. Now you can see they've got these small boats called canoes. This is a proper licensed activity centre, so when they're out with a whole bunch of children and they've got supervisors, they take them over to the side when they see proper boats coming through, and they keep them out of the way until we come through. So we don't have a problem with people like the Pirate Castle. Right, we're now arriving in Camden. They're people we know, by the way, in case you were wondering. And we've got factories on both sides. Look at the factory on the left, big brick building. Look at the factory on the right, big white building. Both of them owned by a distillery company called Gilbers. Gilbers don't exist anymore, but they were famous for making gin. Where we drop you off used to be a big timber merchant's. There was a building here that stored blocks of ice that we imported, remember? And then of course engines came, road and railway transport took over, slowly the industries moved away, the factories have been turned into flats, offices and studios. Camden is now famous for the markets. Not originally, remember. And we're going to be stopping here, but the Regent's Canal keeps going. There's 6 miles to go yet before it gets to the next canal and the River Thames, and from here onwards it starts to drop. Look straight ahead. Can you see the bridge straight ahead of us? It wasn't built for those people. It was built for horses. Just after the horse bridge, the gates across the canal are lock gates. The canal drops 85 feet over the next 6 miles with 12 locks, taking the canal down or back up. So think of our canals as liquid highways. Think of the locks as liquid staircases. Now you see this gentleman here with 2 little boats together on our left side. Now it's known as the poo boat. I told you earlier we have pump out services to empty our toilet tanks, and this is one of them. So I'll leave you to imagine what's in those containers on this boat. Very, very important job. That wouldn't be my choice though. Right, look at the wind, and you know what that means. Look over to the left, everyone. Look over to the left. Look immediately to our left and look at the brickwork going up to the horse bridge. Can you see horizontal cut marks? Over there to the left. Yep, you got those cut marks? You know what made them, don't you? Are you saying ropes? But there are rope marks on the underside of the horse bridge as well. There are rope marks everywhere when you know what to look for. And we have just enough room to wind a 72-foot boat. Now look over to the right. There is a boat going up, down, can't say. Going up, I think. Look to the locks, everyone. Look at the locks. We're not going to get a view like this once we're moored up, so look at the locks on the right. Now watch. There's a boat in one of the locks. There are 2 chambers of water there. There's a boat in one of the chambers. There's a 10-foot drop on the other side of those gates. There's another lock and another drop straight up here. Go and find the stables market where they used to keep horses, as it is by far the most interesting part of the market area. And that's not for what they're selling, because it's the same old stuff you find everywhere. But you look at the brickwork and the buildings and the architecture, and you will get the true history of Camden. Now, as we pull up alongside, I have to jump